me tell you, some kids come out super grumpy. So
Yes,
I'm
they do
excited
come
for
out
this
super
topic.
grumpy. They come out super
Yeah.
stressed. They
Yeah.
don't come out happy. And then we don't have happy moms and we don't have
Well,
happy dads. And that's not what birth was meant to be.
mm,
I don't think God made babies to make our lives miserable for the first year of our life.
just because we find things common and everybody doing it does not mean that it's normal,
Mhm.
and it's absolutely not okay.
Just because everybody's child has ear infections doesn't make it normal. Just because
Mm.
everybody's child has colic, indigestion, throws up, spits up, has constipation, diarrhea, doesn't matter, doesn't make it normal.
And you see all these other babies throwing up, you become more aware of it, right? So then you're looking, and when all of these other babies might be doing the same thing, then you're just, oh, that's just what babies do.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Skip Wyss, and I have my co-host, the beautiful, wonderful, radiant Dr. Julie Wyss. How are you today?
I'm good.
Yeah, I love this studio. We're coming at you live from Legacy Life Media. I guess it's not live. This is taped a little
Well,
bit.
it's live for us.
It's live for us. It's a live recording for us.
And
Now,
anybody else who's in the
and
studio with
anybody
us.
else who's here, which it's just us today. It's just
What are you talking about?
So, Dr. Julie, I want to talk about a subject here today that's super, super important to all of us. It's chiropractic care for babies.
Mhm.
How to raise a happy, healthy kid from day one, from the start.
Let me tell you, some kids come out super grumpy. So
Yes,
I'm
they do
excited
come
for
out
this
super
topic.
grumpy. They come out super stressed. They
Yeah.
don't come out happy. And then we don't have happy moms and we don't have
Well,
happy dads. And that's not what birth was meant to be.
Mm.
I don't think God made babies to make our lives miserable for the first year of our life, of them being
first
here.
year, it could be multiple years, but
Yeah.
no, that's not the intent. And I think we're just missing, I think, some really big milestones.
Mhm.
And what I found, like what we found over 16 years, is people don't talk about it,
No, they
right?
don't.
They
No.
think, well, or they see somebody else doing the same thing, or they just assume, well, that baby is crying just as much as my baby,
Mhm.
or well, that was okay for them, so that must be okay here. And that goes back to, just because we find things common and everybody doing it does not mean that it's normal,
Mhm.
and it's absolutely not okay.
Yeah, I think everybody's heard us beat that drum a little bit, and it's super important.
But
And
people still need to hear it
yeah,
because
it's
they
not
still
okay.
are
It's not
comparing
okay.
and thinking that, well, that was okay.
Number one thing is commonalities do not make normality
Mm.
at all. Like that is one of the biggest things that we talk about at Prime Family Chiropractic Centers all the time, and that we talk about with our moms, is that just because everybody's child has ear infections doesn't make it normal. Just because everybody's child has colic, indigestion, throws up, spits up, has constipation, diarrhea, doesn't matter, doesn't make it normal. The body needs to function and heal the best it can, and it can do it on its own as long as it's in full communication with the brain. And guess what? That brain's been in full communication since that baby was 20 days old in mom. And then 10 months later, baby's out, and they're here now in your arms, trying to learn how to breastfeed, trying to learn how to live and survive and thrive. And they're being born in a hyper-stressed, hyper-cortisol-laden environment.
I was like, you know that I love analogies.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing. Because like as you're talking, I was like, oh, this is why it seems so commonality. And then it makes it normal because, like when you're going to get a car,
Yeah.
right? And say, whatever that car is. And you're like, yeah, because I want it because nobody else has it. And then you get that car and then you look around and it's just like, oh my gosh, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. Right? Because you become aware of the thing that you want or the thing that you have. And now everybody else has it. Right? And you thought it was just you. So maybe before you had this baby, you didn't think about these things. Right. And now maybe you have this baby that is always throwing up. And because maybe now you're going to places where there's other parents and you see all these other babies throwing up, you become more aware of it, right? So then you're looking, and when all of these other babies might be doing the same thing, then you're just, oh, that's just what babies do,
Right.
right? But you,
Right.
like you just said, we are such a stressed population, and if mom or dad, like however that baby was conceived, right? Maybe we already have some issues from
Conception.
from
Yep.
conception and then through labor and delivery, that now these issues are just heightened.
Yeah, heightened awareness and then heightened sensitivities to
Mhm.
everything. Baby comes out heightened sensitive. Now, babies are born naturally. They're born stressed. They are born in a state of fight or flight. They're born in a state of sympathetic dominance because their body needs to survive. So they're going to protect themselves. They're born fetal. They have their hands up by their face. Their knees are up. They're protecting themselves. But then they are also born with a tremendously amazing reflex called a Moro's reflex. And that's that excitatory reflex that makes their hands stick out and flail when you go to put them down, or let's say they're asleep and then they wake up when you put them in their crib or down on their back. Like these things happen. Well, that reflex allows them to stimulate and extend, but more importantly, calms down the nervous system. Now, there's nothing more important in calming a nervous system than crying and tears. Tears bring on rest and digest. Tears bring on what we call and known as parasympathetic dominance. It's important to have these things to actually get a baby to calm down. And from day one, it's important. If baby doesn't get a chance to get skin on skin with moms, they change their heart rate. They will change the way they breathe. There has been research study after research study showing the importance of skin to skin contact right away. That is number one. When baby is born and baby is out, baby needs to be skin to skin with mom. Baby needs to be skin to skin with dad because of temperature regulation, because of respiration regulation, and because of regulation with their heartbeat. You talk to any midwife that is worth their salt and has went to school and is certified in taking care of children and taking care of birth. You talk to any doula or birth worker, they will tell you the importance of skin to skin contact. That's not just made up. And if it was made up, if it was just Dr. Skip's opinion or just Dr. Julie's, none of the other birth workers in healthcare would be talking about this. And they will tell you it's one of the single most important things that can happen.
It's that important. And it's like lots of times, like if you're having a home birth, right? I think that's just common that that's how that's going to happen, that we get
Yeah,
that skin on skin.
right.
But if we have a hospital type setting, like you're paying for that room, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get to say the things that you want and make those things known, that as soon as that baby comes out, that you're not cleaning up, that you're getting that skin on skin. I understand sometimes there can be those emergent, situations, but as soon as you can get that skin on skin, all of a sudden that emergency becomes less emergent,
Yep.
because lots of times it is breathing issues,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or it's that skin
Mm-hmm.
coloration. Well, if we can get that mom and baby back connected, those things resolve rather quickly.
Well, it's interesting because there's a very important test that medicine does when a baby's born, and so will your midwives, and it's called an APGAR score. And the APGAR score is actually measured at 1 minute and 5 minutes of life, what they would consider life, but outside of mom. And it's on agitation, pulse, appearance, respirations, and growth or grimace. And what we're looking at is, are they upset? Do they get mad? What's their pulse like? What's their respirations like? How often are they actually cycling a breath through? What's their appearance, which is where we always see a change in APGAR. APGAR is measured out of 10. 10 is normal. 10 is not perfect. 10 is normal. Anything below a 10 is considered non-normal and needs to be checked and followed up on. Hence why it's at 1 minute and 5 minutes of life. Now, one of the most important things that we need to understand here is that the most common thing and variant that we see in an APGAR score is either appearance or their respirations. These are what you see change. You don't see a lot of accelerations and decelerations in heart rate. Once baby is out of mom, it generally stabilizes really well. But then where you will see a change is you will see a change in breathing, which means the baby may not be breathing or not getting in the breath that it needs to get in, or we'll see a change in color, which will also be tied to breathing and blood flow. Most babies, if the color is off, they will be one of two colors. They will either be too yellow or they will be blue. And both of them are signs of cyanosis, which I mean lack of oxygen.
It's just serious.
which is very serious. And some babies, they just need to have their chest rubbed and they wake up. Others may have to have oxygen on their face. They may actually have to get some breathing done to them and assist in them in that realm. But the thing is then once this happens, it's blown off. It's not talked about. It's not mentioned. And this is one of the biggest hallmarks in a child, whether or not they're going to thrive the rest of that point forward, is how do they score?
I remember, back, I mean, when our kids were younger and stuff, and we had
Mm-hmm.
some discussions with some providers, and knowing that 10 is ultimately what that child needs,
Yeah.
right? If we talk about like a battery, right, or we're going to charge our phones, we're not going to charge our phones 75% or 80%. We want our phone charged 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the discharges for majority of these kids from the hospital, and the provider is they're not leaving with tens.
Right.
Majority of the time, like there are no 2 tens given. And
No.
that is a concern.
Well, if we look at Netter's book, Guyton's book of physiology, you look at Mosby's book of physical diagnosis, you look at, I'm blanking on the name of obstetrics that you can look at, but understanding that this is in every one of those textbooks on how to judge and find this. And it says directly in these textbooks, if they do not meet the 10 standard, there is a sign of birth trauma.
It's how alive you are.
And that's where we're coming in on this. Exactly. How alive you are, how alive your baby is, how is your baby going to thrive? How are they going to develop? Because we know that when baby starts learning how to breastfeed. It's already learned how to breastfeed in utero, mamas, and learning how to suck and swallow. It's been developing that since it was about 23 weeks old in you, right after you've hopefully just had your first ultrasound at 20 and your only ultrasound at 20. And then from that point forward, they're learning how to suck and swallow, but it doesn't come online till they're at 37 weeks inside of you. So if they're born early, if they're born prior to 37 weeks, they will have problems breastfeeding right away, which may mean that they need assistance. But after that, they're going to have a lot of these different pathways programmed and online and running like they're supposed to. But what we have to understand is that if they come out and they don't know how to breastfeed properly, if they're having problems latching, if they're having problems turning their head from one side or the other, they favor one breast over the other, or maybe mom's production isn't quite where it needs to be yet. And that's where it's an incredible yin and yang with mom and baby for breastfeeding. Baby's latch needs to be good in order for mom's letdown to be good. Mom's letdown has to come online and be good in order for baby's latch to stay on. They work together as synergists, and when either of those are off, and most likely it's baby's latch, mom's letdown and production changes. And that is an ultimate, lack of pun, a letdown for mom, because it immediately will cause a separation between you and your baby.
And the stress, the emotional
Yeah.
side of it. And that's where they tell a mom of like, hey, just try to relax so then you can get that baby to latch. Like, that's really tough. But I've been there. I understand. We walk through this with moms every single day. But there are resources. Like, we can help. If breastfeeding is where you need that help, we can help with that.
Yeah, chiropractic can help with that. Finding a certified chiropractor through the ICPA in children can help with that. We know the assessments. We know the cranial work. We know what it takes to get the jaw to work properly.
It's not just a lip or a tongue tie.
It's not just a lip or a tongue tie. There's so much neurology. And what's happened is because lip and tongue ties have become so common now that it immediately gets talked about like it's just a limitation of tissue and it just immediately needs to get removed. Well, all of that tissue that makes up the mouth that we've talked about on here previously makes up the same tissue that lines the vault where the brain sits and where the spinal cord then goes down the back. So that tissue is all connected. It all works together. It's a synergist as well. And we need to work within the realm of the body to get these areas to work properly. And when we have an overstressed, overworked nervous system that's not communicating properly, the body gets overstressed as well. You like analogies. Winter is coming up. And I want you to think about this. If you have a loved one that's out on the road and you cannot get communication to them, Let's say Verizon is down like it was a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden you can't communicate, and it's blowing and it's windy outside, and you don't know if they're in the ditch or not, and hopefully they show up at your house. Your body feels the exact same way when it can't communicate to the brain, because the brain is the mother that runs the entire ship. And if that brain can't fully communicate with the body, both parties get stressed, both parties get worried, both parties don't know what's going on. So then I've got cell phone signals going out trying to make calls on both ends, and most of the time they will not align properly, they will not communicate, and then we get super stressed babies. And we get super stressed parents.
Well, and then it's a cascade.
It is a cascade,
right?
Of events.
Because like we can't just be stressed. That means that there's hormones involved,
Mhm.
and then the cortisol, and it's a vicious cycle.
It is
So
a
at a certain
vicious
point,
cycle.
we just need to be like, okay, we're going to break this cycle.
Mhm.
This is what we're going to do, so that we can continue to grow and develop with healthy babies.
Exactly. And it starts with getting their body back into full communication with their brain, getting them assessed, getting their neurology tested, and making sure that that nervous system's fully communicating, fully functional, and the body can then heal itself interference free. We've seen this year in and year out since 1895, folks. And that
Not us
is
personally.
not us personally. I'm not that
Although
old.
we look pretty good.
Yes, we do look pretty good since 1895. But the biggest thing here is that we need to understand and help these kids thrive instead of just survive and get through life. And they have these overstressed nervous systems. So parents, what you will notice then too is when a baby's body is overstressed, they will have a bunch of tension. They will be too tight. Their muscles will be super tight. They don't relax. They're rigid. Exactly. They're always pushing themselves back. They're always trying to curl up in a ball. They don't like tummy time, or vice versa. They hate being on their backs. Exactly. Dr. Julie, what do you think is the best route then for moms as we're talking through this cascade of events and what to look for in their children when they are super stressed out, their bodies themselves? Do you think breastfeeding plays a massive role in this as well?
I think breastfeeding is vitally important. It's really that foundation. It's that building block, right? But I don't want to lose anybody at that point if breastfeeding isn't part of that circle, right? So, but we have to then, even if we're bottle feeding, we still have to look at the mouth, right? That is the form of nutrition. And if from stage one, if we can't eat, that means that there's going to be malfunction. There's malnourishment. Because if we can't eat, that means something's not going to be working correctly in the tummy.
Right.
So then we have to be concerned about bowels and digestion. If the mouth isn't working to get that suckle, if it's the breastfeeding or if it's the bottle feeding, that movement, that means that the brain isn't going to get the proper neurological signals to help with that, right? So each of these movements, these reflexes of like, yes, we need to eat. It's part of what we do, but it's so intricate in there is a proper way that we breastfeed or we bottle feed. It's the way that the lips move and the tongue moves, right? It's become very cosmetic to have a perfect looking smile, but right above the, behind your teeth, above the roof of your mouth, that's your brain up there. And if that baby can't have the proper motion with the tongue, and why we talk so much about breastfeeding is because, again, that is to the vault of the brain. And so that's sometimes that first signal that we can get. If we can't breastfeed, if we can't get that latch, that means that we're going to have some development issues with the brain.
Well, suckle, swallow is a motor process, right? And your brain needs motion, it needs motor to survive. So your first form of motion in a child is the way they feed, is the way they breastfeed. Otherwise, they kind of lay there like lumps, do their little thing and get around and scoot around and root around. Like they do that, but it's that motion that feeds the brain. It's their mouth that feeds the brain, and that actually feeds the body. So that's that first stage of digestion like we've talked about. So moving on then from breastfeeding, as a child then develops, and we'll get into this in later podcasts, just probably not next week, but talking about this development in children now, big milestones hit at 4 months, not 2 months like everybody talks about. 4 months is when your first milestones start to hit. 6 months, you start losing some of these reflexes that they're born with, like grasp reflex should start to be going away, Gallant's reflex, latch, root.
But here's the thing, let me interrupt you. That is what it typically should be. Our kids are not going to follow a textbook development chart.
Not perfectly.
The problem here is when the other organizations and the government starts to change these developmental
Yes, coming
milestones
in and literally
and
changing
brush
it.
it off, that it's
Mhm.
no big deal. So that tells us back to conception,
Mhm.
right? That it's fertility, it's conception, but again, back from birth, that there are delays.
Mhm.
That we need to change the textbooks, that we need to change the signs of, okay, if your child isn't doing this by this stage, it's no big deal. We're just going to move it down the road. We're just delaying these diagnoses and finding these issues that could have been helped when your child was 1 month, 2 month, 6 weeks old, and now they're just being pushed down the road.
They
That's
are.
my frustration.
Well, and I get your frustration because some will say, and they'll argue back at you and say, well, advances in science and physical diagnosis tell us that babies don't all sit up at the same time. No, they don't, but they sit up at relatively the same time, which is right around 6 months. They learn to crawl between 6 to 8 months, maybe 9 months. They learn to start to walk and talk. They learn to start to walk between 11 months and 13 months to 14 months. They talk right around 14 months. Like, these are things that are literally neurological motor patterns in development that are there. And we can't just write them out of our education. We will try. Like, they've gotten rid of the ability of a baby to roll over from front to back. That should be happening between 4 to 6 months.
We can talk.
And we
Sorry.
just move on beyond it. And that's not
Yeah,
okay.
we can talk about evolution, right? That we
Mm-hmm.
should be getting smarter and stronger as a species. But if we have to start changing these milestones, that means our society is going the other way.
Well, it is
So
what's
we
happening.
we have to look back, okay, what is causing this?
Yeah.
And this is
Yep.
like multiple podcasts, but
Mm-hmm.
we have to look at, okay, what are we doing? What is the epigenetics? How are the sperm and the egg coming together? And again, that growth and development.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're stressed as a society, when there's things that are going on in the media outside of our control, and we haven't been able to manage that, it reflects on our children.
It sure does. And it manifests in them later on in life. And then it'll manifest in
Mhm.
your grandchildren, and it'll manifest in your great grandchildren. So, my biggest takeaway from this is, how do you break the cycle? You start with love, you start with
Mhm.
patience, and you start with trust. And then you go in and you make sure that their nervous system is fully communicating like it's supposed to when they were put together. That's what we see all the time in chiropractic, and that's what we see here at Prime Family Chiropractic Centers. And that's why we're on this podcast talking to you all the time about this, because this is how you were meant to function. This is how God created you, and this is how you're going to sustain a very happy and healthy life in yourself and in your children.
You can't be living life at 80%. Who would want to do that? Myself, right? So why would we want that for our children?
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to, if that child isn't leaving with a 10 out of 10 when they leave the hospital, that means that your child is not fully alive.
Nope, it's not, and it's already regressing. So we need to get on top of this and just start creating more awareness to get these little kiddos checked out. So, Dr. Julie, do you have anything else you want to add in this week?
No.
This was a great podcast. This was fun. There's a lot of passion here because this is what Dr. Julie and I deal with on a daily basis. But more importantly, this is what we love to do on a daily basis and who we love to help. So, if you know anybody that needs our help, if you know anybody that would benefit from hearing this podcast, like, subscribe, and share. Please let them know about us so we can continue to help them as well. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.